Hi everyone, thanks for coming. My name is Ossian Ward. I'm content director from Lisson Gallery in London. Thanks for coming tonight, everyone. Just to let you know, we are filming. I have to say that for legal reasons. I'm proud to welcome you all to this exhibition, LA Deep, by Sean Scully. And we'll talk for about 30 minutes or so, and then have a drink to celebrate the opening. But first, I want to introduce our speakers. Andy Moses is an artist who lives and works in Venice, California, born in Los Angeles, and attended California Institute of Arts. There he focused on performance film, painting, studying with Michael Asher, John Baldessari, and Barbara Kruger. In 1981, he moved to New York and worked for the artist Pat Steer. Later that year, he developed a type of process painting that is simultaneously abstract and representational. He has continued to exhibit his work in New York, Los Angeles, and abroad over the past 35 years. He moved back to Los Angeles in 2000, where he continues to refine and expand the vocabulary of his practice. And Andy's exhibition is at William Turner Gallery in Santa Monica, just opened, and is on until 11th of November. Thanks to Andy for being here. Moving on to Sean Scully, who's known Andy for a long time, and we'll hear all about that shortly. He also knew and showed with Andy's father, Ed Moses, notably alongside Gerhard Richter in 1991 at LA Louvre. Sean Scully was born in Dublin in 1945 and raised in South London. After graduating from art school in the UK, he had his first two exhibitions outside of the country, here in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica, in 1974 and 75. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today. Sean is one of the most important painters of his generation, known for his large-scale abstract paintings comprised of vertical and horizontal bands. Here we're proud to show early works from those first two shows in LA over 50 years ago, including the work Blaze from 1971 and two more 1970s works in the antechamber room behind there. So I'm going to let you guys talk. You've both crossed paths many times in LA and New York, but just tell me a bit about how you guys got to know each other. Thanks.
So I think Sean and I met in 92 or 93 in New York. We were introduced by a mutual friend, James Hayward. And then Sean would come over on a regular basis to watch. It was an interesting time for heavyweight boxing when Mike Tyson was around, and he would come over and we'd watch the fights together. So that's how we connected initially, but I feel like it's hard to have great conversations about painting, even with painters. I think we've had a lot of great conversations about painting for the last 30 years, and it continues to this day. So hopefully tonight will be a good night. I've loved the work since I first saw it, but I feel like every decade it gets stronger. It takes me to new places. And I think of Sean obviously as an abstract painter, and people think of him as a formalist painter, but more than anything, I think of Sean as a great romantic painter, funny enough because he's Irish, but a great English romantic painter. And he's in a tradition that I love so much, going back to Turner, John Martin, who Sean turned me on to, and just so there's a tradition that I feel like you come out of and address. And it's interesting because it's such a different format, and yet it takes me to all these kind of amazing romantic places and ideas in painting. And these paintings are so much about painting. So anyway, I'm going to open it up to you. What do you think of that notion of romantic painting?
I've had a lot of ups and downs in my life, moved around a lot, struggled a lot, and I think that one tends to work towards something that is big enough, constructed enough, and I must say earned enough to be able to pursue it and grow it. If I have any criticism of myself, it's that I move around. However, there is an obdurate nature to my work that is very much like a working class kind of procedure. You know, I don't mess around. I don't change my mind about what kind of an artist I am, and it evolves very slowly. I'm very wedded to my origins. You know, my working class origins are very important to me, and I make a lot of communication with people on the street, and you know I'm not nervous with anybody, and of course there's a reason for that that we both know about.
So Sean comes from one of the tougher areas in London and grew up getting in fights to defend himself, to stay alive. But then you continued in martial arts, right? Later. And I feel like that's a big part of your art practice. There's a discipline and a rigor to Sean's practice that's pretty amazing to me. Just this sheer, I mean, the amount of paint that you move around on each canvas. There's something very physical, gestural. I don't see many paintings like these where I feel like a physical weight is in the room. Like I look at them and they almost feel like these stone-like structures. But then there's these suggestions of deep space and kind of all these amazing places. So I think a lot of your practice does come out of this incredible self-discipline and martial arts.
Well, you know, the painting behind all of us was made in 71.
This painting over here.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible painting.
And so in 71, I was 26, and I went to work in a printing factory when I was 15, nearly 16. A couple of weeks before I was 16. So that painting was made only 5 years after I was working in a factory, which is pretty interesting for me in retrospect, you know, because I always thought, oh yeah, you know, I love Matisse and I can be like Matisse. But I can't be like Matisse because Matisse didn't work in a printing factory when he was 15. You know, he didn't drive across London for an hour and then clock in and then work his ass off. In fact, I was paid so little, I had to buy platform tickets, which you can't get anymore, right, and put a couple of coppers in my hand and give it to this funny old Irish porter that was at Pengeast, where Pissarro painted, by the way, and run with him shouting after me. It was the same thing every night. It was a theater. I mean, he was not really sincerely trying to catch me, and I was sincerely not interested in paying rail fare because I was paid really less than you could live on. So it's in that painting, I think, you know, the rigor, the discipline.
Absolutely. I mean, that's an amazing painting from that time. I mean, it's so complex and so well constructed and so bizarre and so interesting at the same time. I love that painting right there. How much did you sell that painting for at the time?
Yeah, this story is so nuts. Okay, so this guy comes up, a real man about town, Ian Bennett. And Ian Bennett was a big champion of my work. And he was in the tradition of Beau Brummel. You know, he was a Bond Street swaggering guy, you know, with big ties, and who went out with very glamorous women. So he rolls up in Newcastle, which is the last town in England, you know, before you get to Hadrian's Wall, where all the savages lived. that the Romans were unable to conquer. And he stood in front of that painting with his model girlfriend right next to him and said, "Wow, that's great. How much is it?" And I was tortured, you know, and I didn't want to say £100 because that seemed like really a lot. So I said £90, which is $120. There is, however, a very beautiful postscript to this. He lived in a street in Notting Hill, you know, which was made famous by the movie. And he couldn't put it in his apartment. So he moved. So it wasn't about the money. Nothing was about the money. He sadly became a heroin addict. He was so incredibly intelligent that I guess he had to check out.
So you were able to get it back from him?
And it came up for auction, and I bought it. No, it was actually remarkably cheap. I think it was about $15,000. It was a long time ago, you know. So. But anyway, what also I'd like to talk about, I mean, you did talk very well about the paintings and their weight, and they are a bit like stone.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to talk about this love affair, this early love affair I had with Los Angeles. You know, maybe we could talk about that for a bit.
Absolutely. So you came out here in 74, or was it 75?
74. I had an exhibition in London. I was a child star. And, and it was in the nicest gallery in London. Beautiful gallery. And the very next thing that happened was a guy from LA fell in love with my work, who had a gallery. So I had a gallery in LA in 74. I only started my career in 73.
That was Tortue Gallery, right?
Yeah. Yeah, in those days it was called La Tortue. And I was kind of astounded by America. You know, the space. Because London is a town of bricks. At the end of the 19th century, London must have looked like a building site. Because to make a brick is unbelievably labor intensive. To dig it out, put it in a mold, heat it 500 degrees, then transport it, then take it to a site where a hoddy, which is what I was, laborer, puts 12 of them in a box on a stick and runs up a ladder. Then you have to put them on the wall.
So you never had to make any bricks, though?
No, but I had to carry them up and down a bloody ladder. And the whole town is made of bricks. So when you think about this, when you think about London, There's literally zillions of bricks. And it's full of passages, tunnels, and wonderful cul-de-sacs and so on. But everything is claustrophobic. Everything is surface. And when I came to LA, I couldn't touch any surfaces. Everything was so far away. I found it extraordinary. Maybe you can talk about that in your relation to, you know, the kind of painting you make and the kind of painting that...
Right. Well, grew up in LA by the ocean. I could see the infinite space, sky meaning ocean, and that was my youth, and it was magical. And then when I was 19 years old, I moved to the Lower East Side in New York, and I was like, holy shit, what did I do? And it was tough. I stayed there for 19 years, though. And when I came back, I had a studio in Venice and then a little tiny little shack on PCH. And I would make that drive every day and see that infinite space again. And it's what I wanted to make my work about after that. I said, this is it. You can't beat this.
Yes.
So it's funny, because I went to Cal Arts, where you were told to make art that fit into art history in a very specific way. Like, this is the next logical step. This is where you have to go. It's not a personal journey. It's a journey in art history where you have to fit into the mold. So it took 20 years of being out of art school to come back to embracing what I saw when I was young. But I feel like these paintings of yours also very much connect to this personal history that you have. And I feel like we have great conversations because we're coming from a place where we've really returned to the most sort of basic drive that drew us to painting in the first place.
Yeah, well, the reason that I am committed to painting is because it uses all the attributes. And the attributes are your body and your sense of logic, or and then there's another kind of intelligence, which is, of course, intuition, highest form. And this higher form has to be wedded to material. And the opportunity and the defects of the material as the thing is being made. So it's physical and mental, emotional, and it's a dance all at the same time. And that is probably why we like boxing so much, because boxing makes you think on your feet, you know.
In the moment.
In a split second. So it does involve intelligence, but it's the kind of intelligence that's extremely primal. And this is included, depending on how you paint, of course, in the act of painting. And when I'm making a painting, I really have no clue how it's going to turn out, except that it's going to have these bands on it that I insist on, that I use as the armature. But on that armature, I hang a lot of, I hope, pathos, poetry, and strong reference to nature. And my references to nature have got stronger since I left Manhattan.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. We were both in Manhattan, and we always talk about how there's probably more of a connection between LA art and London art than there is. And Manhattan is sort of out of the equation.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons, I think. I mean, one of them, you are just physically in a box there. And then I think there's just such an overwhelming sense of art history that you're sort of pussyfooting around and trying to fit in somewhere instead of going on a great adventure and making your work and seeing where it takes you. That's what I love about looking at these paintings. I feel like each one is an adventure that you went on, and I think you can get lost as a viewer in these paintings. They really take you somewhere. You can't take them in a moment. It takes a moment, it takes a while to stand in front of them and see, and they take you so many places. And I love this painting in the back, don't get me wrong, it's amazing. But I feel like over the decades, you've evolved so much, and it just takes you to a deeper place. It's interesting, this is called LA Deep, but these paintings take me on a deep dive, and that doesn't happen very often in abstract painting. I mean, these really take me to strong, amazing places. And it's the formal quality of it, but it's the gesture, it's the color. There's an emotive quality of these paintings that I think is incredible.
Well, I personally don't think that New York is a creative hub anymore, because it's become incredibly codified, and the commentators have moved to the front of the bus, and the artists have either moved to the back of the bus or they're sitting on the roof like they are in Mexico on the highway. And I moved to Tapan, we moved out.
Right.
And it was so funny because we were walking along the West Side Highway one day, and there was so much racket with police cars and shit like that. And my wife, who doesn't like it in the first place, said, "See, look at this, listen to this shit. Look at this, and we're trying to go for a walk with our kid." And that was the day we said, basta. And I think our kid was 4. But I found out afterwards, it was the day that Sully landed the plane on the river, which we didn't know because we were downtown. And it was the thing that pushed us over the edge. But we had no idea that there was a plane on the river. Isn't that funny?
That's funny.
And he did an extraordinary job of bringing this plane in. And anyway, we moved out, and I became very involved with the land, because we got 5 acres of land that nobody wanted.
It's a great property, and you see the river right there.
Yeah, and we have a little river at the end, so I made a couple of ponds that were an homage to Monet, and I put the curved bridges over them. and I showed this guy a picture, made him a beautiful picture of the Monet river, a bridge.
Right.
Which happened to be the one in the Philadelphia Museum.
Oh, wow. And
I showed right next to it not long ago. But anyway, this guy, he says, so you want it like this? And I said, no, I want it flat. That's why I gave you this picture. So he said, oh, right, okay. So he made it like that, and then all the frogs and the turtles moved in, as they do, and then I started growing trees. We've got thousands of trees now. I put many in every year, and I think this has influenced my work tremendously. The color has changed, the color of the sky and so on, the color of nature. I'm using a lot of blue, and you can see that the color in that painting is kind of like abstraction meets Walt Disney.
Right.
And the color in this painting has in it a real sense of material weight, like colored stone, colored material. There's a strong association in every painting. And this is something that I want, because I've become more engaged with the environment, obviously, haven't we all? And I think this is where I'm going. And my dear friend Deborah Solomon, writes for New York Times, said it took all those years to get what is in the back in the front. And it does when you make painting, because painting doesn't have so many options. You know, it's very narrow as an art form.
But one other thing I'll say about painting, it takes a long time to really get to somewhere amazing. And I've watched you decade after decade build on the language you started with, but you keep taking it to new places. And these aren't paintings that someone could make 5 or 10 or even 15 years out of art school. These are paintings that have a lifetime of experience of not only painting, but of just observing the world behind them. So I think there's something that can really take you, again, on an adventure, connect you in these sort of romantic ways to the world. But also I know seeing certain places, walls in Mexico, Morocco, the physicality of some of these ancient places has been a big influence on you as well, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, huge. You know, I used to go around Mexico, and it's the reason I learned Spanish. And I would feed myself on these places. I got my original idea from Morocco, which influenced that painting. And then later I moved to America, and you know, I used to be in Texas a lot. I stayed in a hotel in No Country for Old Men. You know, where the shootout takes place. Right. I've stayed in that hotel.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
And I've driven over the border, you know, El Paso, and I always drove around in old cars. And people are nice, especially if you speak Spanish. They give you anything. So I had a lot of great times in Mexico, and I wrote on it in regard to Guadalupe. And that's where I eventually made a little watercolor on the beach in Zihuatanejo. And I'm a person who's never in any particular hurry. You know, I never think about doing something before somebody else does it. Because I really think that the reason you do something is going to affect what you can do with it. Well, it's going to condition it profoundly. Okay, you can't lift somebody else's idea and take it to the same place. So I sat on the beach in Zihuatanejo, and I just made this little watercolor after going around all the ruins, and I wrote Wall of Light. And then I forgot to make the paintings for 13 years. And I made the first one in a gloomy studio in Deptford, near the Old Kent Road, which is where we arrived when we came over from Ireland. The Old Kent Road is a kind of sorting house for immigrants.
Okay.
You know, a place where you can start out. It's still very rough. And I started to break up a painting that I guess I would describe as an all-over painting, made essentially with two colors. And I don't know why I did it, but then I put an orange in a corner, and Lily was with me in the studio. And then she said, hey, yeah, that's a wall of light painting. And then I looked, and then I remembered the little watercolor.
Oh, wow.
And there it was. So the watercolor predates the paintings by 13 years.
Wow. The wall of light, though, is something I've always admired in your paintings because they have a lot of dark colors, a lot of very physical forms, but then you always have this sort of light coming through. So, I mean, these are sort of dark, heavy paintings, but there's always this light emanating and sort of beckoning in the distance.
Well, it's a metaphysical, poetic title for a series, because obviously it's about transformation, because you can't literally have a wall of light. Maybe in the future we can do that, but right now we can't use light architecturally. But you can have a curtain of light, certainly, but I called them wall of light because I became quite an authority on the ruins. You know, I used to go to seek out all these.
Which particular ruins?
Yeah, there's a couple in the north, Labna, Sail, and nobody goes, you know.
Okay.
And I think I was outside, they're across the street more or less from each other. I was outside Labna one day, and I saw this orange on a tree. And of course, being such a romantic, I thought, wow, this is so great. You know, it's outside the orange industry, and there it is, it grows anyway. So I went and I picked the orange and I ate it, and it was foul. I had to spit it all out of my mouth.
Can't always get what you want.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
want to address one thing about these 6 paintings that I love, sitting here now. You're very much come out of this history of, you know, flat, two-dimensional forms. But when I look at these, there's just this constant back and forth between 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions, and it just doesn't stop sort of playing with your eyes and with your senses. And there's something so compelling to me about that, about spatially how these behave, because they look very flat, and then you look a second later and you can see these magical deep spaces that it's taking you into. I just find it very compelling.
All right then.
Thank you, guys. And
Thanks, guys.
at the risk of
Do you want to take questions or no questions?
at the risk of following that mic drop with no questions, I think because we've got people outside and I want everyone to see the show. But thank you very much, Andy. Thank you, Sean. Thanks for coming, everyone.